Hello and welcome back to our video updates. It's Sade. Today's video is going to discuss briefly how the homestead exemptions work here in the state of Texas. The exemptions are going to be different depending on the state you're in, but all states have provisions for them. So I'm going to try to cover this in a quick video, and you will have to go ahead and do your own research in whatever county you're in, because different counties also have slightly different guidelines and rules for being able to apply and get approved for these homestead exemptions. So on the state level, there's a general homestead exemption that we've all heard about, and there's certain criteria that a homeowner must meet to be able to qualify for those. And of course, to be a homeowner, you have to be at least 18 years old. So that's the very first obvious thing. And in addition to the general homestead exemption, there is an exemption for people that have disabilities or people that are over the age of 65. And then there is another type of exemption for disabled veterans and veterans that are qualified as being 100% disabled. And we also have the exemptions for the spouses of the people who are considered over 65 or disabled, because they could be surviving spouses. And then there's some requirements surrounding being able to apply for that as a surviving spouse. Lastly, we have a category of people that are surviving spouses of servicemen that died while in action or first responders that died while on duty. So there will be different exemptions depending on a person's particular circumstances, and you can apply for all the exemptions that you might be able to qualify for. So what exactly is a homestead exemption? A homestead exemption is simply a tool or provision under the law that allows you to be able to reduce the amount of property taxes that you would be required to pay by reducing the overall value of your home that would be used in calculating the property taxes. So property taxes are calculated usually based on the appraised value of a particular home, and there is a standard rate that will be applied across board. Let's say that the property tax rate is 3%. I have property that's worth $100,000. That means I'm required to pay taxes of $3,000 in that year. And then typically values tend to appreciate over time, right? Property values. So there is also the benefit of an exemption that freezes your taxes. There is that type of exemption that's possible in certain circumstances, and it's called a tax ceiling or a tax freeze. And typically that just means that your value that you had at the time that you qualified for that exemption, the appraised value in that first year that you qualified, they would look at that, and then the second year that you qualified, they would also look at that, and you would never pay taxes on anything higher than the lesser of the two values. So let's say my property in the example that I gave you was appraised for $100,000 normally, and whenever I turned 65, I applied for an exemption, and let's say that exemption actually allowed me to take $10,000 off of the $100,000. That means that the value that's going to be used in calculating my taxes will be $90,000, and that reduces the tax burden from $3,000 to $2,700. So that's how the math would work. And then in the following year, let's say the property values appreciated in that community, and my property is now worth $120,000 instead of $100,000. Then normally I'll be taxed. Even if I got that exemption, it would reduce my property value only to $110,000, right? So what the county will then decide is whether they can use $110,000, which is my new value, even with the exemption, because of the appreciation in the area, or will they have to use the previous amount of value that they used, which was $90,000. So they will have to use the lesser of the two, and that's how the tax freeze would work. So that freezes my taxes at $2,700 instead of it being higher due to the appreciation, due to the appreciated value. So that freezes my taxes at $2,700 instead of the taxes creeping up every year like they normally do, because property values tend to appreciate in most areas. I'm just giving you an overview of the common types of exemptions. And so let me go into the criteria really briefly, and also the things to look out for and the differences with the special exemptions as opposed to the general homestead exemption. In order to qualify for the homestead exemption in the first place, any homestead exemption, you would already have to be 18 years old, because of course your name shouldn't be on the deed if you're not yet 18 years old. So the deed is the title document. The deed is the one that shows the owner of record, and the county would use that. The appraisal district is what I'm calling the county. The office that handles all the taxation for all the different taxing agencies and units. I'm just generally calling them the county tax office for the purposes of this video. So the county tax office would look to the property records to see who is the true owner, and that should match the information in the appraisal district, because that's who's responsible for the taxes. You do have to reside in the property that you're claiming as a homestead, but that is a legal definition. It's not anything like the physical presence that we'll think of if we think about residing. So residing could mean that you are working in another state, but your family is still living inside that property. And that is fine, because it's still your homestead. You can temporarily move away as well, as long as you don't abandon the homestead completely. And that is a legal question that only lawyers can explain fully, what the abandonment would look like and how you can argue against it if your homestead exemption is ever challenged. And then the next thing is that you can only claim one property as a homestead at any point in time. So that prevents people from doing anything weird, like trying to have a homestead in different properties that are actually investment properties. So it's supposed to be your primary residence. And then the next requirement is that it cannot be more than 20 acres, and you should intend to use it for personal use. Of course, it cannot be owned by a corporation or other entity. It has to be owned by a human being. And yeah, it has to be owned by a human being, not a corporation or any other type of entity. And those are the main requirements that you have to meet. And you have to have owned that property as of January 1st of the year in which you're claiming the exemption. Typically, you don't get to file an application for a homestead exemption until after January 1st. You can, of course, file it anytime in the year, but they prefer you to file it between January 1st and April 30th to allow the county tax office to be able to review all of the applications and apply the homestead exemption for that year. So try to get it in between that time frame. If you miss the deadline, go ahead and send it in anyway. So what does the general homestead exemption really look like in the state of Texas? The provision out there says that the school districts are supposed to provide an exemption of $25,000 for each homeowner that qualifies, with all of the criteria that we just reviewed a few seconds ago. So you will just send in your application. They will need a copy of your government issued ID and a document showing that you reside at that property, or showing your name linked to that address, the address of the property that you'd like a homestead exemption for. So the general homestead exemption is going to give you $25,000 reduction on the value of your home. If your home is worth $400,000, instead of the tax rate being applied to all of the $400,000, it would only be applied to $375,000 of that amount. So it's very helpful in reducing the overall tax burden. So we have different taxing units, and that particular exemption is only mandatory for the school districts. Any other taxing units can also decide what they want to do, if they would like to provide optional exemptions. Other taxing units could be junior colleges or the county or the city. And so they have their own taxes that they also charge us as homeowners. So you might be able to apply for different types of exemptions additionally to the general homestead exemption if they approve it. Typically, they'll have additional ones that they can give depending on the circumstances. So you have to go with each county's requirements and study what they want. You have to go to each county, and you can look on their website. They all have information out there that will tell you what's needed and what you might qualify for. So see what's the best for you to apply for and apply for all of it. Then the next category of exemptions are those that are those special ones that I mentioned. So some people have disabilities that prevent them from gainful employment, and that's really the definition for the category considered as disabled, to be able to get an additional homestead exemption of $10,000. And most times, if you qualify for the Social Security disability, you would also qualify for this particular exemption. Not always. They would sometimes also ask for your physician's statement. So you could prove it that way. Even if you're not collecting Social Security benefits, you could still qualify if you have the right supporting documentation. So in addition to that $25,000 general exemption, then you also get $10,000 extra. So that also further reduces the value of your home that's going to be used in figuring out the taxes that you're supposed to pay. The other good thing about that particular type of exemption is that it also sometimes provides you with a tax ceiling, which I already explained earlier. And the tax ceiling would freeze your taxes. That's the effect that it has, because you never pay more than you paid in the first 2 years when you qualified for that exemption. So that's actually pretty good. For the exemptions based on disability, you do have 1 year from the anniversary of the declaration of disability or the incident or the event to be able to file your application to be considered as disabled. So they don't want anybody filing things for temporary disabilities. The disability has to be one that's considered longer term, more than a year, or terminal in nature. And then you would want to file it. Let's say for some reason the disability happened in the middle of the year in June, then you would be required to put in that application before June of next year. So you don't have to wait till the new year, like with the general homestead exemption. That one can be filed right away at any time during the year. And then the other related one is the disabled veteran exemption. If the veteran is disabled, they get additional exemptions just as any other person. But if the veteran is declared by the Department of Veterans Affairs to be 100% disabled, then they actually get 100% exemption. None of the value of their property is considered as part of taxable value. And then the next category of exemptions that are total exemptions, just as the one that I described, are for the people, are for the surviving spouses of people that died while in military duty, or first responders that died while serving. So that is actually quite helpful. And with those exemptions, the spouse will just provide documentation. Of course, they can apply at any time, and the spouse does not have to be any particular age. For people who are considered generally just disabled, in order for the surviving spouse to qualify for that same homestead exemption that their disabled spouse had while alive, the surviving spouse has to be 55 years of age or older. And they have to also be claiming that property as the homestead. So all the first set of requirements that we covered also still apply. And then, of course, there's the category of exemptions for people who are 65 years or older. And that exemption gives them an additional amount to also further reduce the value of their property. And then, of course, the tax burden is going to be much lower. So that's how that works as well. And in order to qualify for that, you just apply within 1 year of the anniversary of your birthday, your 65th birthday. So you should apply before you turn 66. If it's late filed, it's okay, just send in it anyway, and they will still consider it if you have good cause. And if you need help, there are different professionals that can help you with, how to process that. And if somebody is over 65 and the person passes away, then the spouse can also get that homestead exemption as long as the spouse is 55 years or older and qualifies otherwise under the other criteria that we mentioned, meaning that the person is claiming that home as the homestead. So those are the main points. The homesteads can be transferred from property to property. So let's say I already have a property that I'm claiming homestead on, and I purchase another property and I prefer to use the homestead for the second property, then I can transfer it over and claim it as my homestead. As long as you don't have more than one that's claimed at a homestead at any point in time, everything is fine. But there is a request form that you have to fill out with the county to be able to do that. And, the other thing that I wanted to mention is that some counties actually send out postcard every year just to test out the property address to see if the mail is deliverable to you at that address that you claimed as your homestead. If it comes back undeliverable, then they remove the homestead exemption, which is not very nice, but you should definitely keep an eye out for making sure that your addresses are forwarded. You should make sure that you're forwarding your mail even if you live temporarily. Even if you're living somewhere else temporarily, you could still consider it as your homestead. Just make sure your mail doesn't go back returned undeliverable. The other thing you could do, if you're not sure, from time to time, you can check with the county tax office to make sure that your exemptions are still in place. And then the final thing that I wanted to mention is the question that comes up all the time is, what if I have a home with my mother? Can she get the homestead exemption for people over 65? And the answer is yes, your mom can still get the homestead exemption for people over 65. However, she's only going to get half of the normal exemption because only half of the house is hers. So let's say the over 65 exemption amount is $25,000. She'll only get $12,500 in addition to the general homestead exemption that you already have, which is $25,000. Okay, so you can have half and half. Let's say you have other property that you already consider as your homestead, and then you have a second property with your mother or father, and you just cannot apply for a homestead at all because you already claimed one as a homestead. Then your mom can claim her homestead exemptions under the second property, and again it will just be reduced by half because she only has half ownership under Texas laws. So those are the questions that people had. I think I covered all of them. If you have specific questions, you can reach out to our office. And if you like the channel and what you're seeing, make sure to subscribe so you can continue to get notifications from us. And thank you for watching, and I'll talk to you soon.